Hey everybody, today's topic is our old friend stage fright. And this video might go beyond musicians to anyone who has to get up on a stage and have their best foot comfortably forward, because for almost all of us, I think our stage fright is the enemy of doing what we do well. I had it really bad. I had it while I was at the Berklee School of Music. I had it while I was getting going in New York City. I had it for the first 4 years that I was playing with the Brecker Brothers. And I managed to play pretty damn good on that gig anyway. But I couldn't enjoy it the way that I have enjoyed myself since 1996. There is a thing, I think there's a connection between the driver that makes us want to excel at something as crazy as pulling music out of your you-know-where with no safety net and hopefully no foreknowledge of what we're doing, and we're out there and everybody's like, well, play something amazing, I'm here to be amazed. Or if maybe you're a comedian or something like that, if people come to see mastery, and in the jazz world, that means playing with all that great confidence. The first name that pops into my head when I think of this is Dexter Gordon, because Dexter always put his notes in such a perfect, beautiful place, and there was no question that Dexter was the master. But for the rest of us, we have had to work our way through using our neurosis as a motivator, but getting rid of it once we can play or speak or tell jokes or act or whatever it is, so it doesn't hinder our performances. I got rid of it in 1996 after 6 months of psychotherapy. There is a book out, an excellent book called Effortless Mastery by the great pianist Kenny Werner, that a lot of people are aware of in and out of the music business. And Kenny, in the way that only a jazz piano player could, talks us through letting go of the idea that our self-esteem is riding on whether we can play giant steps at 310 beats per minute in B flat instead of B, and stuff like that. And it includes a disc of meditations that's super helpful. At the end of this, I am going to propose a different way to meditate on it. And this is something that was instrumental in getting me past it. And it's a technique that I think kind of anybody could use. One thing to be aware of when you're out there and that ghastly crowd of cynics is hoping for you to fall on your face is that nobody's there to see you fall on your face. People actually really do want you to burn. And there's always a couple people in the back that are like this. But, we don't play for them. We play for the people who want to have a fantastic experience. They want to put themselves in the hands of a master and come out of there and feel like they got thrilled by somebody who really knows what they're doing. You would be shocked at the number of fantastic jazz musicians I've worked with who are still really, they get nervous. One that comes to mind is Michael Brecker, of all people. That is the voice of confidence, in my opinion, is the way Mike played. But anytime we played in New York, Mike would kind of bum out a little bit because what he called the jazz jury was going to be there. And that meant all the musicians from the New York area. And of course, if there's anyone who wants to go see Michael Brecker boggle their minds, it's those people. But nonetheless, Mike got nervous, even with that insane command of the instrument. I produced a number of records, and different people would come in and listen to what I thought was a mind-boggling playback. And they would kind of just be hanging their heads and like, oh my God, I'm so awful. I'm just going to quit. Not going to mention any names. And I would be like, gee, if I could play like that, I think I could die a happy man. Uh, so it's a common thing. One musician that comes to mind is the late great, unfortunately, guitarist Dean Brown. Dean and I did so many gigs together. I wonder if we did 1,500 gigs together or something like that. Started out playing in this dumpy little bar in Long Island with half of it was a dirt floor, but we had so much fun playing loud Latin fusion in there. Then we got with the Brecker brothers and we did that together for about 4 years. Then I started playing with David Sanborn with Dean. Dean was playing with Marcus Miller's band. He was playing with Sanborn's band. And at one time there was the Brecker brothers were competing for his attention. And Dean worked a lot. And I was in a van with him for 20 years. But Dean always told me right before he went on stage, he had a little panic attack. And he couldn't avoid it. And, he said that he had made his peace with it, that it was a little jolt of cortisol and adrenaline that might have helped him play like he did, which was in a completely transcendent way. But he told me this. He said when he got out on the stage, at the first opportunity, he played something audacious that he knew he had never played before. And that was a way of setting the expectation that he was there to improvise, that he was going to leave it all on the stage. He added this other saying that I think came from his dad, sometimes peanuts, sometimes shells. And the weird thing about it is that once you have that attitude, the shells become super few and far between. I got in 1996 where I just didn't care. If I had an off night, I was going to go for it. The one guaranteed way to have an off night and to fail is to be super nervous and conservative and like this little mouse that's trying not to play anything but the safe stuff. Now you have failed to reach escape velocity. And you look at those gigs and it's like, gee, that's super timid. Once I got my head around just forgiving myself if I had a terrible gig, and one that comes to mind is the Copenhagen Jazz Festival in something like 2013. We're in Tivoli Gardens, there's like 15,000 people there, and just for whatever weird reason, I just couldn't put three notes together. But that one stands out because once I forgave myself for playing imperfectly or trying something that I couldn't land or something like that, Dean used to call it writing a check he couldn't cash, I just stopped having bad gigs. I went out there, I still get a little, not like Dean, I wouldn't call it a panic attack, but you do get a little jolt of adrenaline as you go out. But kind of by letting go of this idea, as Kenny Werner would put it, that my self-esteem rides on how well I play, all of a sudden I just started playing well every night, I think. Here's an exercise to consider that I first bit into this when I was at Berkeley, and it helped get me where I was at least functional enough to do things like the Brecker Brothers gigs. I figured out, when I first got to Berkeley, the first thing I saw was this student recital. And I didn't know who any of these people were. And I said, let me go see how my fellow students play. And I go in there, and as it turned out, it was Branford Marsalis's farewell recital or just a little concert he was going to get out of there. And it was Branford. I think it might have been Jeff Watts or Smitty Smith on the drums. This guy named Leo Quintero on guitar. And the worst part of it to me, Wallace Roney was on trumpet, was this piano player, Makoto Ozone, who's now, a world famous guy. But back then he was like this 19-year-old guy from Japan who played like Oscar Peterson on steroids, an insanely talented, great swinging piano player. And I stood there and just got torched by this band for like an hour and a half. And it was the only time in my life that I ever considered giving up on this idea of being a jazz guy. And it scared me into the woodshed, believe me, but it also made me super apprehensive about trying to catch up to that level. I didn't have that much going for me when I got to Berkeley. And I would practice and work on stuff. And I was building myself as a piano player, but the whole thing was so laden down with me so worried that I had already missed the boat, that, gee, these guys already sounded like the greatest jazz band I'd ever heard. And, and then there were auditions for things like Phil Wilson's band and trying to get into Ed Tomasi's class and stuff like that. So it was super freighted down with all these dire expectations and, oh my God, if I can't do this, what am I going to do? And I developed a habit of practicing like this. My shoulders were up and I wasn't breathing. And and I had this biofeedback thing going where I was nervous, so my shoulders came up and I stopped breathing. And then, since I wasn't breathing and my shoulders were up, that sent a message back to my amygdala or whatever it is that said, you are in a terrible spot. This could go horribly wrong. And it kept going around, and then my shoulders are super up like this. And I reached a point where I realized that by practicing when I was nervous, I was practicing being nervous. And anytime I went to a jam session or anything like that, that was my posture. I wouldn't breathe. My shoulders were up like this. And it was this self-induced panic state that I brought with me from the practice room. So I decided one day in the middle of my fourth and last semester at Berkeley that I was going to prioritize getting rid of that loop. And that when I was practicing, if I felt like any of this was starting to happen, or if I caught myself catching and holding my breath, I would stop. And I would just kind of take a minute and try to relax and then start again. And it took me a good 6 months to get there. But this is what I did to get there. I was already practicing Hannons. You always heard those in the Berkeley practice rooms. But I started to practice them what I call my ugly Hannons. I'm going to do a completely separate lesson on this. And I advocate this not just as a way of checking ourselves for our nervous habits, but also of a way of just working on our time, isolated from the lines we play. And I needed this. Like a lot of super nervous people, I was playing on top of the beat. And I think some part of my, defense cortex or something figured, gee, if I just play ahead of the beat, the whole thing will speed up and I can get out of this uncomfortable position. So I started practicing the Hannons like this. 1, 2, 3, 4. Okay, That's ugly. It's not in time. What I'm working on there is I'm trying to swing my notes. I'm trying to play, like to get a swing feel going. I'm trying to accent as wildly as I can on the notes between the beats, because to me that should be our basic articulation. When you're playing, you're going to accent whatever wherever serves the line, but for me, sounds better than. So I'm trying to play as far behind the beat as I can, and it's a work in progress always. I want to see how experiment with playing behind the beat. But also, it's a meditation for me. It's something that's so simple to play that I can devote some brain power to how I'm sitting. Are my shoulders down? And they probably could have been more down in that example. Am I breathing? It's a way of giving yourself 15 minutes where that's what you're driving, is your comfort level, rather than sitting down and just starting to dig into a standard and so forth. It's also a great way to center in only on your time. You'll notice that I have the metronome only on 2 and 4. Jazz is a backbeat music. I'll also put the metronome only on 4 so that I have to carry the time a little bit longer. But I think it's a good idea to take yourself offline of the actual mission of creating a melodic line or comping well or whatever have you, and just get down to these fundamental things, so that, because there's a lot going on when we're improvising a jazz line. Take the notes out of it and just focus on being comfortable and confident. This also applies if I was giving a speech, I would work the speech, but if I'm practicing it and it's starting to dawn on me that, oh my God, those ladies in the PTA or whatever it is are going to be there hearing it, and I start to get nervous, just stop and make sure that while you're practicing the speech or while you're practicing improvising, you're practicing speaking or improvising relaxed. And that was really a key thing for me to get where I could execute what I was trying to do without being paralyzed by fright. The first rehearsal I ever did with the Brecker brothers, they hadn't really heard me blow a solo. I was helping them make that first Return of the Brecker Brothers record. And I think Ileana Elias, who I'd been working with before that, she's a ridiculously great piano player, and I was playing the production for her on the keyboards. She figured out that I could play pretty good, so she recommended me to them. But when they told me, do you want to be in the live band? I couldn't believe it. You could knock me over with a feather. But I was also kind of struck that they hadn't heard enough of me playing to know whether I was going to be good at it. And I was good at it. But the first rehearsal we did, we started out playing this super fast tune of Randy's called Above and Below. Great tune, super difficult head, but I knew all the music cold going in. I think I even had it all memorized at that point. And I knew I could execute the heads, and I knew I was going to be cool at the comping or whatever. But here come the solos, and Randy takes a solo, brilliant. Mike Stern takes a solo, brilliant. Mike Brecker takes a solo, brilliant. And everybody looks at George, and I didn't have anything. I'm actually a very good fluid improviser, and I was ready to do that gig. One tour later, we filmed that Barcelona video, and I play pretty good on that. But for this, it was humana, 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 if I can quote Ralph Cramden on that. And I was just frozen with fear. And then later, I heard Dennis Chambers in the next room over, and he was on the phone, and Dennis was playing drums on this thing, and I had just met Dennis. And I could hear that he was having kind of a pretty animated conversation with somebody about something. And I assumed he was saying, this keyboard player's got to go. You know, I didn't know Dennis, who would never say stuff like that. But later I found out that Dennis recommended me to John Schofield. So, you know, that's how paranoid and worked up and freaked out I was. So the therapy helped rid me of the things that had made me insecure in the first place and got me to a point where I could just say, you know what? I'm going to go out there. I'm going to listen. I'm going to see what the music is, you know, the waves of music are providing for me to surf on. And I'm going to trust that I'm a damn good surfer. And we're all better surfers than we think if we'll just get out of our own damn way. So I'm going to do a more in-depth lesson about my ugly Hannons because there's kind of more to think about in there as well. But try to make a practice, whatever instrument you play, that you're going to devote some time to doing stuff where you know you can monitor yourself for making sure that everything is relaxed and flowing like it should be, and that you're not, you know, you don't have any level of that biofeedback thing going. When you practice, practice being relaxed. Because if you practice while you're uptight, you're going to practice being uptight, and you're going to go on the stage, and lo and behold, you're uptight. So whatever your discipline is, be it an actor, make sure that while you're running it, you are clued in that you're running it and practicing being relaxed at the same time. And that's my wrap. That is my way of beating stage fright and getting to where I could really enjoy what I do. And I wish you the best in your quest to get rid of your stage fright as well.